Welcome one, welcome all to Inside the Den. It's been a minute since we've been back, but there's loads of content to cover. And with me, as always, is Chris Murray.
Yeah, you were over in Europe and I was in Napa. You were in Europe longer and I was in Napa, but how was Oktoberfest?
Amazing. Wunderbar, as our German friends would say.
Okay, what does that mean?
Wonderful.
Okay.
Loads of beers, loads of good times. I mean, it's a once-in-a-lifetime kind of thing. And
yeah, and you got to miss a couple weeks in Nevada football, so you didn't have to go through that.
Exactly. I was, the time change is quite a thing. And,
yeah.
Luckily for me, it was like early morning hours, 2, 3 in the morning when Nevada was playing.
So you weren't
back
tuning
here.
in for that Texas State game?
I was dreaming of better days,
You were back for Fresno State, but you got to miss a couple of them there, right?
Yep. So, apologies. We haven't been back in a while, but, we're here to break down some Nevada football that has been struggling as of late.
Yeah, it's been difficult. I mean, I don't think anybody expected Nevada to be 0-5 at this point in the season. I don't think a lot of people expected them to be on a 15-game losing streak. I don't think people expected them not to take a big jump forward from last year. I mean, we haven't seen a noticeable increase in terms of their level of play from this season compared to last season. Now they are in their bye week. So we'll see when they come out of this bye exactly how they look. They'll use a week maybe to get some competition on the offensive side of the ball. I think that's kind of been the focus in recent weeks is Nevada just cannot move the ball offensively. I think in their first drive and their last drive against Fresno State, they had about 150 yards. In their 10 middle drives, 6 of them went backwards. They had right around 30 total yards of offense during that stretch and 40 plays. So they're really struggling offensively. We'll see if we get a quarterback change up here coming up. See if there's any changes with the coaching staff, but they cannot continue to play offense at this level. And I think Coach Wilson knows that. I mean, he was very, strong in his comments after the game that the offense needs to play a lot better. And typically you don't see a coach get to that point where they're kind of singling out one unit, but he's getting to this point, and it makes sense given how poorly the offense has played, bottom 5 in the nation in points scored per game.
It's been rough. I mean, we talked about prior podcasts that they've been zero-dimensional, like even dating back to last year, in this 15-game losing streak. And, there's glimpses of the run game potentially working, but on all fronts, it really is just a low-performing group. It's hard to put it all on Brendan Lewis, certainly. Some fault lies within the coaching, you don't want to call out certain coaches, but they're just not scheming their players open. They're not getting players in advantageous positions. So it's been a tough watch, but prior to the season, we said, hey, if they're up around 25, 26 points a game, like they'll be winning some games. But, we didn't expect half of that.
Yeah, right around 15, but they have a defensive touchdown thrown in there, and then they got a safety. So 9 of the points they've scored this season are because of the defense. So the offense has really struggled. I mean, you talk about running the ball in terms of running with running backs. They've really struggled. I think Brendan Lewis has been able to generate some yards with his legs, which is nice. But in terms of being sustainable, you want to be able to run between the tackles. They've not been able to do that. They've not been able to throw the ball, and that's not all on the quarterbacks. The wide receivers have really struggled outside of Jamal Bell. Spencer Curtis has had, a couple of nice plays mixed in there as well. I do think you'll probably see a quarterback change, maybe even going into the UNLV game. A.J. Bianco has looked better as a passer than Brendan Lewis, but a lot of that has come against, your second and your third strings late in games. When he was put in the Fresno game right in the middle of the game and going against that Bulldogs #1 offense, things did not look much better as well. So, obviously the coaches have to look at themselves and say, what can they do better? The offensive line has really struggled, specifically this last game against a very good Fresno State defensive front. So there are not a lot of answers, but the answers have to come from within. This is not an NFL team or a pro team where you can go and get some guys in the middle of the season and try and improve. The guys they got in the offseason, and there was a lot of anticipation that a lot of those Pac-12 transfers would be able to make an impact and make this offense more explosive, has not come to fruition so far. So we'll see if they can figure something out during this bye week, because the schedule is going to get a lot easier. The teams they've played thus far in the 0-5 stretch, they are very good teams. You're talking about a couple of ranked teams. You got USC, Kansas was ranked at one point, Fresno was ranked at one point. So you've got that. Idaho might be the best team at the FCS level right now, so they're very strong as well. Texas State is 4-1, so they're a much improved team. They're going to have some chances to win games given the Mountain West schedule that's coming up. But they have to play much, much better. If they play like they have through these first 5 games, they're going to end up with 1 or 2 game wins. And at that point, you're probably making a coaching change. So the goal was getting to a bowl entering the season. I think now that we've hit the bye, the goal is to do enough to show that Ken Wilson deserves a third season here at Nevada. And that might be a little bit harsh just because of the fact that he did inherit a really big mess. But you can't go out and win, lose. That would be, a 22-game losing streak if they don't win again this season. So we'll see if they can raise their level against your New Mexicos, your Hawaiis, your Utah States, your Colorado States, even UNLV this next upcoming game. I think is winnable if they play well. It's just the playing well part on all three phases that's been difficult. The defense has shown some improvement. So, I think that's one of the silver linings thus far.
We've seen some, glimmers of hope within the Kansas game and the Texas State game. Halves of play that, inspired some hope that they would at least, get a victory or two this season. And, you want them to string these performances together to, potentially win a game. And it's just interesting, looking at it, being like, hey, can they do it? Because it seems like they took a step back against Fresno State. And granted, Fresno State has the number one defense in the Mountain West, top 25 team. But on all fronts, it just seemed like it was a tough night in the Valley. Defense kind of held it together for them. That was a positive, certainly. But again, at this level, you need offense.
Yeah.
And that's a premium. And it was interesting, we look at Lewis and Bianco and the two different prototypes or quarterbacks. Lewis is a guy that can get you yards on the ground, and Bianco's a guy that more of a traditional pocket passer. So you look at that and you're like, how do they want to build this identity of this offense? Because to start the game they were like, all right, we're going to lean into Lewis and his mobility. We're going to do some QB draws. We're going to do some, get him out in space and use his ability. And then when that stopped to work, the offensive coaching staff kind of second-guessed themselves and started inserting Bianco in there. And like you said, it's more of a competition now than it was prior to the start of the season. So we'll see when they face UNLV next week. I do expect, Bianco's probably going to get that first series. But
yeah, we'll see. I don't know that the coaching staff will come out and say, we're going to change our quarterbacks, because then maybe that's a tactical advantage. I think A.J. Bianco is a very strong prospect. This is a guy who had offers from your Nebraskas, your Washington States. He was committed to Hawaii at one point. When he's been on the field, he's largely made really good plays. There's been some mistakes in there because he's a redshirt freshman and he will make some mistakes, but something has to change, right? You can't continue going to the same exact formula and it not, providing any dividends and say, well, let's just keep doing these same things and hopefully it changes. So if there is a quarterback change, it doesn't mean that Brandon Lewis is the reason that they've really struggled on offense. I would say this last game was probably his worst passing game. So there were some struggles there in terms of being able to hit some wide open receivers. And then, Delvon Campbell had a deep ball that he had in his hands that he was unable to catch. And, if you get some help from your wide receivers, maybe that changes. But we have seen that progress on defense. Now I would say, defense, 95% of the plays, they're playing really well. And there's always those couple of busts that really, submarine the whole effort. In the first half against Fresno State, they basically only gave up 2 plays that entire half. Second half, they got a little bit looser. But when you're seeing progress, you can say, okay, well, they're moving in the right direction. I don't know that we're seeing progress in this offense because you saw what they did against Texas State. Again, there was a 98-yard interception return for a touchdown. You take that out, you take out, the one at the end of the game where, your second and third strings are in defensively. They scored right around 10 points on offense. This last game, they basically were shut out until that last 90-yard series where you're going against second and third stringers. So that Kansas game, they played well offensively, but you look at Idaho, you look at USC, you look at these last 2 games, Texas State and Fresno State, there's not a lot there to say they are going in the right direction and they're being able to either sustain long drives or make enough explosive plays to stay in games. So, it's going to be a lot of self-reflection during this bye week. As Coach Wilson said, a lot of competition to see who belongs out on the field. That's not just at quarterback, that's at wide receiver, that's at running back, that's on the offensive line, which I think had probably their poorest game this last week against Fresno State. So, we'll see what they come out with against UNLV. I think they will be inspired. I think they will play hard. I think they'll try and make that a competitive game. They were a big underdog last year, and they, were a goal-to-go situation of winning the game. So, I think they'll come out inspired, and I think they'll play well at Mackey Stadium. But the offense has just been really, really bad. There's no way to sugarcoat that. And like you said, if your offense is not giving you, at least 17 points per game, that's the Iowa formula, but Iowa has a stellar defense. Nevada cannot back it up with that quality of defense. And then this last game, 10 penalties, and then they were not very disciplined as well. And, that was the second most penalties in the Ken Wilson era. So that was a big bugaboo there. And we'll see, an emotional game against UNLV, whether they can play a little bit more discipline and not let that emotion get to them.
Yeah, I mean, you go back to penalties, especially last Saturday. Some of it's on your players, but some of it is on the coaching staff. You have your, illegal formations, you have your delay of games, you have your, just illegal substitutions and stuff like that. So a lot of procedural stuff that should be ironed out during the week, and just wasn't at the time. Some other news that dropped during the weekend, and Isaiah Sissima was a healthy scratch, and it raised some eyebrows on Saturday, like, oh, where is he? Is he hurt, or is he just suspended or something?
Yeah.
Turns out he took a step away from the team to potentially enter the transfer portal with intent to play for a new team next year. What are they losing with a guy like Sissima?
I mean, he was starting at them for cornerback. I mean, he's more or less started the last 2.5 seasons, so that's a big loss there defensively. They're going to have to play some younger guys. KK Meyer was knocked out of that Fresno State game, but he'll turn into a starter. Jaden Dedman played in that game against Fresno. I thought he played really, really well. Interesting with Isaiah, because us in the media, we have to put in our requests. What players do we want to talk to? On Monday, we have to put in those requests. And I was told Monday afternoon that all of our requests had been approved except for Isaiah Sissima. And that was a little bit weird. Just wanted to talk to him because he had been playing wide receiver. So talked to him about going two ways. And I'm sure he grew up dreaming about that. So I kind of put on the radar of our reporters, like, this guy's played 4 games, and now he's not available to us kind of out of the blue with no explanation. He might be doing what Jackson Kincaid did a couple of years ago, where he plays the 4 games, which you can play up to, and still use that as a red shirt. Since Isaiah played as a true freshman, he has a red shirt season available to him. So, like you said, he's going to sit out this year, and then he will, get that year of eligibility back in 2024, be able to be a grad student, and he finishes out his degree here at Nevada, and then go to a school that maybe is having a little bit more success. So, you do lose a big piece in that secondary. We talked about that secondary not having a lot of experience. I thought they played really well against Fresno State, though. Amani Johnson with a couple of interceptions. He made some big plays, so he's kind of establishing himself as that deep safety. I think, like I said, Jaden Dedman played pretty well. KK Myers had some good moments. He was knocked out of that Fresno State game with an injury, so we'll see if he's healthy to play against UNLV. Michael Coates Jr., a kid who's from the junior college ranks, got to play his first extensive playing time at Nevada in this last game at cornerback. So that's probably the guy you're looking at, Michael Coates and KK Meyer. If he's healthy for this game, they're probably going to get more reps because of Isaiah not being out there. But you can kind of understand it by a Sissima's standpoint. I mean, he's gone through 15 straight losses. He probably wants to end his college career at a little bit of a higher note. So you never like to see guys transfer, but it does make some sense to maybe hit that portal again and see where you can go. This is a kid who started his career at Wake Forest and then the last 2.5 years here at Nevada.
Yeah. Definitely a surprise, but, it's you're on an 0, you haven't won this year as a team, and he definitely wants to search for greener pastures, and certainly a guy that has the talent to play in the Power 5, but again, it's never a guarantee in this NIL era. So, wish him the best of luck wherever his future endeavors are. But yeah, I mean, like we talk about defense, Monty Johnson had an amazing game. He's really stepped up. During his time here, he barely saw the field, but this year he's kind of making his presence felt. And it's good to see because you think of him as more of a box safety, but he's out there in the secondary and get interceptions. So a solid, a bright spot. That's far and few in a roster that or a team that has had minimal success. I guess what do they have to do to really kind of turn around and potentially make the game versus UNLV competitive?
They have to find an identity on offense. I think the defense is coming along, and they're going to be playing opponents where there's probably going to be more success coming up. Now, UNLV has scored 40 points in all of its 4 wins, so it's a pretty potent offense, and their one loss this year was at Michigan, which almost everyone will lose to. So UNLV in particular, they're running the ball a lot better. So in this game against the Rebels, they're going to have to slow down the run, which Nevada actually has been pretty good at this year. I expect that defense to continue to get better and, become, at least a mid-level Mountain West team. It all comes down to, can you find an identity on offense, whatever that is? And I think they were trying to turn it into this last game. Brennan Lewis, let's use his legs. Let's get him out there. Let's let him make plays. And it did work for that first series, but then kind of bogs down after that. So what do you want your identity to be? When Ken Wilson got this job, he said it was about obviously having balance, but being able to run the ball between the tackles, which is what they did during his last tenure here under Chris All from 2004 to 2012, when they won the WAC title in 2005, when they won it in 2010. They were a super potent running team. This program has not been able to run the ball for the last 4 or 5 years. And to me, it's not because of the running backs. It's because of the offensive line and the struggles there. Not that these guys aren't trying hard, not that they're not giving full effort, but the offensive line was such a strength under Chris Alt for so long. In the decade since he resigned, 2013 to now, they've had some good offensive linemen, Joel Bitonio, Austin Corbett. They've not been able to have a solid 5 that can impose its will on the opposition's defense. That has not happened in the Jay Norvell era, and that's why, despite how talented they were at throwing the ball, they were not able to win Mountain West championships. They were not able to do it in the Brian Poland area, which was much more run-oriented, although they did have a couple 1,000-yard backs in Don Jackson and James Butler, both of whom have had very successful pro careers. And they've not been able to run the ball with consistency under Ken Wilson. So until that happens, with this wide receiving core, I don't think you're going to be able to go out there and throw for 300-plus yards. They have to be able to run the ball with some kind of efficiency to keep the opposition's offense off the field, to be able to get some first downs, to be able to put your quarterback in third and manageable rather than third and deep, which Nevada's not set up to have a lot of success with. Can they run the ball or figure out some kind of formula to get ground yards is the biggest question mark for me. That's what they have to do if they're going to be able to beat your New Mexicos, your Hawaiis, your Utah States, your Colorado States, your UNLVs. Like, those are winnable games. Nevada just needs to play a lot better, and we'll see if they can do that offensively to be able to at least, turn around the season to some degree and, maybe win 3 or 4 games here down the stretch.
Yeah. And we talk about the offensive line. It's kind of interesting, the development or regression thereof, within that group, within the union. It's like, it's a question like where are they getting the talent pool from? You would pull from the Central Valley and Sacramento and Fresno and all these areas, and you'd get gems, right? Every so often, with Joel Bitonio and obviously in our own backyard with Corbett and just this lineage of Jeff Nady and stuff like that. But maybe it's not as much of an emphasis for these recent staffs to really bring in these.
I think they're trying.
Yeah.
I think it's just hard. It's hard to get 8 good offensive linemen at a Group of 5 school. That's probably the most difficult position along with cornerback because of how few there are that are elite. Now, I think you can train offensive linemen to be great. Joel Bitonio had a scholarship offer from Nevada and San Jose State and was previously committed to UC Davis and might be going into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So you can find these guys in certain areas. But you look at that 2012 line, it had Joel Bitonio, it had Jeff Nady, who got into some NFL camps, it had Christian Barker, who won a couple of Super Bowls with the Patriots and had an NFL career. It had Matt Gallis, who was an all-conference center. It had Sebastian Tretola, who played in the NFL. He ended up having to transfer because of grades to Arkansas, but he made it to the NFL. Kyle Roberts, who won a Super Bowl ring with the Broncos. He got into some practice squads at the NFL level. That was a very, very talented offensive line. When you're talking about 4 or 5 different NFL caliber players, and Nevada's not been able to have that kind of consistency on the line now. Now, a lot of that is the coaching changes. They've had 7 or 8 or 9 different offensive line coaches since 2009, basically the last 15 years. So in terms of, being able to recruit the kind of guys who fit your system and then develop them in that system over 3, 4, 5 years and have that cohesion, they've not had that. So that's where kind of the blame goes with the offensive line. It's not these individual guys and their efforts and their determination and their desire to be good. It's having that system in place where you're recruiting to a specific system, you're letting these guys develop from high school freshmen to 5th-year seniors and not having to try and go get junior college guys or, Power 5 transfers, which they've not gotten a lot of those guys who've been able to step in and be good immediately. And, they obviously lose Aaron Frost and Grant Stark, both those guys playing and starting in the Pac-12 right now. Those would have been your 2 tackles, and then your offensive line is so much better. So, like I said, you can't blame it on any individual player or position group on the offense. The whole thing has to get much better, but I feel like it's coming to a boiling point where Coach Wilson is even getting to a point where he's publicly voicing to the media, those guys need to get better because his focus is on the defense. I don't think he's trying to, push the blame over to someone else. Ultimately, he oversees the whole program. But it is fairly obvious that this offense, both last year and this year, has not been good enough to win games.
Yeah. And again, you have to understand your personnel if you're Kennon's staff, right? If you have a line that's not great at blocking, pass protection, like we saw the bevy of sacks against the Bulldogs on Saturday, you have to really just start, getting the ball out quick, do a quick pass game. Although that's kind of what they've kind of had to do with the recent struggles. Like you look at like the average yards per pass against Fresno State was like 3.5. So it's just a lot of dump downs and check downs, but they can't really, they don't have enough time to let stuff develop downfield. And granted, there was times in the game when it could have upped that number, like when Delvon Campbell was open down the sideline and it ricocheted off his hands. But it's kind of the offensive staff needs to understand what they're working with and like get players in space and form that identity that they have. You look at around the conference, Air Force, what are they known for? A triple option. They know what they want and what kind of players they want to get. It's like, does Nevada have the offense have that identity? Not quite. They're kind of a mix of like a Chip Kelly and sprinkle in the pistol here and there. It's like it's really they want to be a team that plays in space, but they have troubles playing in space.
Yeah.
That's the innate advantage of college football, right? It's the long hashes. So you have your guys like Ashton Hayes who is hurt, a Sean Dollars or a Spencer Curtis or a Jamal Bell who is your ultimate gadget guy, and we've seen that in games where they've attempted to get him the ball in space because it's explosive, but for whatever reason it's just not working.
Yeah.
So
let's end this on a positive note, though. How many wins do you think Nevada gets over its final 7 games? Do you think they get some wins? Because if they were to lose out, I think it would be a top 10 losing streak in FBS history. It'd be 25 straight losses. Yeah. I just feel like you look at the schedule. I think it's ranked about 123rd remaining strength of schedule out of 133 FBS teams. So I think it will be very difficult for Nevada not to win at least one game. I'm going to give them 2. I'm going to say they beat New Mexico and they beat Hawaii. So I think they go 2-6 in conference. 2-5 over their last 7 games. Are you giving them any wins? I think you had them winning 8 before the season started.
It was 7.
I'm pretty sure.
They pump the brakes. It makes me look bad. Again, we were optimists before the season, but it's quickly come crashing down. But shoot, that's tough. I mean, because you look at New Mexico and you would think you're like, oh, that should be a win. But New
Mexico's offense is playing much better.
Yeah, they played Wyoming pretty tough.
Yeah, they lost to New Mexico State, so
yeah. Again,
there are at least you can look at some of these teams that are struggling and say, okay, well they're doing that well. Like Utah State's offense has been very good. They're I think top 30 in the nation in offense, even though they're struggling. You look at New Mexico, who's been really bad for quite a while. Like their offense is much better than last year. They're averaging like 10 points per game more than they were last season. You look at UNLV, we talked about them. Their offense has really taken off. Now, Hawaii, they're about what they were last year. Their defense has given up exactly the same amount of points as last year, like right around 37 points per game. You look toward the bottom. I mean, Colorado State, they really struggled on offense last year. And now they put in a new quarterback, Braden Fowler Nicolosi, who was committed to Nevada at one point. He's averaging like 350 yards per game in his 3 starts, and they're averaging more than 30 points per game under him. So you can lose games if there's areas of positivity you can look at and say, okay, they're getting better. And it's just hard to look at Nevada and say they're getting better. Like they're getting a little bit better defensively, but compared to last year, I would say they're worse defensively than they were last year. They're worse offensively than they were last year. Special teams roughly the same, and that can't be the case going into year 2. So I understand looking at the remaining schedule and saying, I don't see a lot of wins, but I think it's light enough that they probably do, score 2 wins.
Yeah. I'll give him, I'll hit you with a Vegas and 1.5.
1.5?
Yeah.
And you take the over or the under on that?
I'll take the under. Probably like,
under.
I could see him beating Hawaii.
1-11.
Yeah. I see Hawaii because if they're, stagnant and they're in the same spot as last year, that was a very close game.
Yeah.
And,
it's in Reno. Hawaii doesn't usually
Timmy
win
Chang,
in Reno.
So
yeah,
he's gonna give one to us.
Oh yeah, he's gonna be on the hot seat too.
Yeah, so we'll see. Yeah, there could be quite the departures coaching wise in the Mountain West next off season. Obviously, we don't want to speculate, but it's
I don't think anything's happening in the season, so I think they have the remainder of this year to prove that they deserve a 3rd year, that the program is going in the right direction. Obviously, up to this point, you can't say that. They've got 7 more opportunities to say, that demonstrably this program is going in the right direction and they're getting the most out of their talent. The coach's job is to bring in the best talent possible and then to get the most out of that talent. Ken Wilson inherited a terrible situation last year. I think he gets a pass for 2-10. They brought in more talent from the Pac-12 specifically. The team has not gotten better. So I think even the coaches on the staff will say they're hugely disappointed in what's happened because this is a more talented roster, and what we've seen on the field thus far has been lesser than what we saw last year. Now it's against a very, very difficult schedule, and I think that's the point where we need to get more data points. We need to let these next 7 games play out against lesser competition. And like, let's say they go 4-3 or 3-4 over these last 7 games. Then you can say, okay, well, the non-conference ended up being a lot more difficult than anybody thought. That's why the season started off so slowly. But once they started playing more light competition, the coaching staff was able to put the players in better positions to win games. So, 7 games to be able to go out and show that this staff is pushing this program in the right direction against more similarly talented teams.
Yeah, it remains to be seen. But I was talking to Shannon on Saturday, and we're like, oh, it's like that was the first conference game. Usually like you can toss aside out of conference and be like, that's when like for a lot of teams, that's when your season starts in conference.
Yeah.
They're 0-1 in conference, right? Like, and it's the sky may be falling, but again, it's just the start. So
Yeah.
again, like
Well, I
that
think
story's not written.
there's also the disappointing aspect that Nevada and Fresno State came into the Mountain West at the exact same year from the WAC, 2012. These have been very similar programs. These have been brother and sister programs. Fresno State has won 4 Mountain West championships since 2012 when they both entered the Mountain West. Nevada's not even made it to a Mountain West championship game. One of only 4 schools out of the 12 in this conference yet to make it to a championship game, the other being Colorado State, New Mexico, and UNLV. Now, that's not on Ken Wilson. That's on Nevada football overall, that you were at the same spot as Fresno State when you guys both joined this conference 11 years ago. And Fresno State's won 4 football championships, where Nevada's won 0 and not truly even competed for one in a championship game. So what is going wrong with the program that you were in the same spot as the Bulldogs? They've been able to make this step and be very successful, and you're sitting here not being able to build off that 2010 season. I think everybody new is in place. It's a new president, it's a new athletic director, it's a new football coach. It's almost nobody who was here for that Mountain West transition on campus is still there. But they do need to look at, you can't say that you guys were apples and apples and now you're not, you're a dried up grape and Fresno State's this great pineapple since they both moved to the Mountain West. When I was kind of getting ready for the game, looking at Nevada as a 25-point underdog, that kind of did stick in my head that these guys were rivals and in the same spot 10 years ago. And now one program has ascended and become championship good in a more difficult conference in the WAC, and the other has not had that kind of success.
That's fair. Similar communities, similar locations, and kind of the same facilities, and similar assets, So it's interesting to juxtapose the 2 programs and how they've been built. But an overhaul is needed. Well, Chris, thanks again for jumping on this, and apologies for waiting so long. I had to do my thing in Europe, so. But we'll catch you next time. We'll break down or preview the UNLV game next week. That'll be on NSN, of course. So stay tuned, and thanks for joining us inside the den.